Hello students of class 3, I am your Gopa ma'am and I welcome you to English 2 class. Now children, this is again our revision lesson and this video is related to the online teaching materials that were uploaded on 1st of September and 3rd of September. Today I will be revising with you the chapters that are included in your first unit test. What are the chapters? From wind chimes we have, from the prose section we have Peter enters the garden, and from the poetry section we have I asked the little boy who cannot see. I'll briefly discuss Peter enters the garden. Children, can you tell me the name of the author? Who is an author? An author is a writer, a person who writes stories, novels, etc. Now, this story is written by Beatrix Potter. Now, children, Beatrix Potter was a writer and illustrator. Now, this is a very interesting story. We find that old Mrs. Rabbit, she lived with her children underneath the root of a very big tree, and she had 4 bunnies: Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail and Peter. In this story we find that Peter is very naughty and up to a mischief. Now one day she went to the baker's to get some brown bread and currant buns. But before leaving, she warned her children not to enter Mr. McGregor's garden. Why, children? Because Mrs. McGregor had put their father, that is Mr. Rabbit, in a pie. She went out with her umbrella. Now the good bunnies were Flopsy, Mopsy and Cottontail. They listened to their mummy and they did not enter into the garden area. But Peter was very mischievous. Very, very naughty. He entered into Mr. McGregor's garden. First, he ate some lettuces. Children, do you know what a lettuce is? Just take a look. And then he ate some radishes. After eating too much, he felt sick, and he wanted to have some parsley. Do you know what is parsley? Just take a look. Now, Mr. McGregor, he was on his hands and knees planting cabbages. He saw Peter and he started waving a rake and calling out, "Stop thief." Now, why was he called a thief? Because Peter had not taken permission to enter McGregor's garden, and so he called that poor little bunny a thief. Now poor Peter was frightened. He rushed all over the garden and out of tension he had forgotten the way to the gate through which he had entered into the garden. He lost one of his shoes into the cabbages and the other shoe among the potatoes. Peter was dreadfully frightened. He was very much frightened and he thought that he is going to die. He cannot escape from the hands of Mr. McGregor. So what did he do? He started crying. Some friendly sparrows, they heard him crying and they told him that you have to save yourself from the hands of Mr. McGregor and you have to do something. Soon Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve. Now take a look at the picture, children. This is a sieve which he had planned to pop upon the top of Peter. But Peter squeezed through. He wriggled out just in time. He managed to escape by twisting his body. Peter rushed towards the tool shed. He hid himself in a can. Now Mr. McGregor was sure that Peter was there in the tool shed, and he began to look for him. Right at that moment, Peter sneezed. Mr. McGregor understood that Peter was there, and in no time he was after the poor rabbit. Peter saw a window which was too small, but he managed to escape, upsetting a few plants. But Mr. McGregor, he realized that he cannot escape from the window, and so he went back to his work. Sometime later, Peter began to wonder from here to there. What will he do? How will he escape? All of a sudden, he saw an old mouse carrying beans and peas for her family. Peter asked the old mouse the way to the main gate. But unfortunately, the old mouse was carrying a pea in her mouth, and so she couldn't answer. What would Peter do next? Peter returned back towards the tool shed. From there, he could hear the hooing sound. He saw that Mr. McGregor was hooing onions. From there, he saw the way to the main gate too. Now, how would he escape in front of Mr. McGregor? After seeing Mr. McGregor, he climbed down the wheelbarrow and he ran as fast as he could along a straight walk behind some currant bushes. Mr. McGregor saw Peter, but unfortunately he couldn't catch hold of him. Peter slipped under the gate. He was a little rabbit, and so he could successfully go through the gate. He kept on running and did not stop or look behind, and he finally reached the tree underneath which he lived with his family. Now children, that was all about Peter enters the garden. Now coming to worksheet for day 1, I have given you 2 questions. The answers were already given earlier, but children, I would like you to remember that if the question is in present tense, your answer should be in present tense. And if the question is in the past tense, then your answer should be in past tense. In the poem, I asked the little boy who cannot see, as we have already discussed earlier. The poet asks the boy about different colors. But the little boy who is blind, cannot see, is aware of what colors are like. And he describes them and relates them to the things he can feel, he can hear, smell and taste. Go through part 1 given on day 2 and answer the questions given in the worksheet. All the questions have been discussed earlier, children, so please give it a try, and when you get the answer key, tally your answers with the answer key. Revise the chapters and be thorough with the text. Stay safe. Meet you in the next class.